Hey everyone, quick disclaimer before this video starts. I have a really awesome announcement and a little plug that I want to throw into this video before we get into the main content. My best friend Will and I have started a 3D printing podcast. It's been on our to-do list for a while now. We had this awesome idea back in April and we finally got around to all the logistics of figuring out how we want to do this, getting all our audio and video recording equipment situated, and we have just posted our very first episode. It's episode 0, the introduction, where we talk about how we met, our backgrounds in 3D printing, and kind of what the plan is for the podcast. So it's available in video format on my YouTube channel. I have a whole playlist dedicated to that. And then it's also available on Anchor, Spotify, and it'll eventually be published to all the main podcast hosting sites as it gets approved. But for right now, it's definitely live on Spotify. So we are obviously trying to build our audience for the podcast. So if you love 3D printers, hopefully you do, because that's why you maybe clicked on this video. Definitely consider checking out our podcast and following along on our journey with that. So let's get into the video. Well, I caved to the Prime Day deals from Amazon a few weeks ago and bought myself another 3D printer. So, as I mentioned already, a few weeks ago, Amazon had their Prime Day with all sorts of deals, and I most certainly caved and fell into one of those deals and purchased another 3D printer for myself. I was already looking at buying another 3D printer to help increase the throughput and redundancy of my mini manufacturing center here at home. Basically, if one printer is already occupied with a part or project, I can have a backup to start a new part, because some parts take several days, or if a printer goes down and I'm waiting for parts to come in, I've got a backup printer if I need to get parts out quickly. So I was already looking at getting another printer, and Prime Day, this was a pretty good deal. I'll get into exactly how much I paid for it here in a minute. But in today's video, I want to unbox it and get it set up for you guys and kind of just tell you briefly why I chose to purchase this printer for my second printer. So for those that don't know, I purchased my very first personal 3D printer in December of 2019. For those that also don't know, I do 3D printing for my full-time job, and I have several 3D printers at my work, at my disposal, that I can use. However, I do like having my very own personal printers at home that I can tinker with and have fun with my personal projects, obviously in the comfort of my own home. So in December of 2019, I purchased my first printer, which was a Creality CR10 V2. And over the past year and a half, I have been thoroughly pleased with that printer. I've been so happy with it. It has produced some awesome prints, and soon I'll be posting up a review video after I've had a lot of time working with the printer and what my thoughts are. Basically, in sum, I think it's one of the best first 3D printers that you can buy. So because of my great experience with that printer, it led me to purchase this one. But as you guys can obviously see from the box here and the title of the video, this is also a Creality printer that I just purchased. It is from the same CR10 family, just as my first one is from, except this one is the CR10s Pro V2. So it's a little bit of an improvement and upgrade from my standard CR10 V2. However, I still very much like having that printer for several reasons that I'll go over in the video I'm going to make specifically on that printer. But basically, this printer's got some more features and it's a little bit more upgraded. Obviously, it has a nicer screen and everything. So I was just really excited to have another printer that's similar to the one I have, but has some nice new features and upgrades. Enough of me jabbering on. I'm going to go ahead and open the box, unbox it, show you guys exactly what you get when you purchase one of these, and then I'm going to go ahead and get it set up. Alright, a little tricky on how they package it. They package it really well with lots of foam, but it's difficult to pull out piece by piece. So the best is to just pull it out all as one piece here. So here's what you get when you pull it out of the box. You got some manuals and an invitation. You got some sample filament, probably not the greatest, although I have printed some pretty good parts with that. This is most likely our toolkit. Yep, toolkit, power cord, spool holder, and a few other things that I'll go over in more detail here in a second. And then we got our printer. And the nice thing about these CR10 printers, might be similar with the Ender series printers as well, is they basically come and two main parts. You have the base, and then you have your Z tower, and or gantry is what it's commonly called, and then it basically bolts together like that. You plug some things in and boom, you're good to go. So let's see how I can take this foam off without totally ruining this. Alright, there we go. Boom, so here you got your Z tower or gantry, you got your base there. So just for the sake of the video, I am going to be setting it up in my garage, but this will not be the final point where I'll be keeping this printer because it needs a little bit more front to back space. I'm just assembling it out here, and then I will bring it upstairs into my 3D printing lab. One thing I was happy with when I purchased my first 3D printer when I got it from Creality was the fact of how well it's packaged. So I know sometimes with certain printers they're not packaged very well, and then through the shipping and handling process things get damaged. Well, so far my experience with Creality is they package their printers really well with this really nice kind of like packing foam that's specifically cut and shaped to hold the printer in place, and then they also got foam in here to keep the bed stabilized so it doesn't slide back and forth during shipping, and the gantry is also supported as well. So that's nice to see that again. So I'm going to go ahead and just take the foam off of the bed here that was basically holding it in place. Alrighty, so that was nicely packaged in there, keeps the bed from moving back and forth. Okay, so here's kind of what I'm talking about with how easy it is to put these printers together. You basically have 4 bolts, 2 on this side, 2 on this side, that hold the gantry to the base part of the printer. Then you've got your main power feed here for the stepper motors on the gantry, the extruder, everything like that. And then you've got your limit switch plugs that you have to plug in, and you're pretty much ready to go. Before I get into assembling the printer, I'm going to go ahead and just quickly go over exactly what comes in your little tool and parts box here. Okay, so first thing, got your power cord, of course. Next being, you got your little SD card USB adapter here, so that's always nice to have if your computer doesn't have an SD card reader. Got some stickers, and then I believe what this piece is right here, it's kind of black, I believe this is the Z-axis spacer now. So when I had my first 3D printer, when I purchased my first one, it did not come with this, but this is actually a really important tool to have, which I will go over later in the video when I'm doing the setup process. So here we got kind of like some zip ties. You got your little pliers in this box. You have a nozzle cleaner needle. You got your screwdriver, and then a bunch of hex keys and open end wrenches as well to help you tighten various pieces of hardware down. You got a shim tool, so this is cool. This also didn't come with my first printer. This probably could be for bed leveling and setting the nozzle to bed distance. So you got your 4 bolts here that you use to secure the gantry to the base. You have your some extra nozzles, you have a few extra compression fittings, and some hammer nuts that will come in probably at some point in the assembly process. We have our USB cable. If you want to control your printer through Cura on your computer, you can basically command and control your printer directly from the computer. So that's a pretty cool feature that I will go over how to do in another video. You got your spool holder that mounts to the top of the gantry or Z-axis frame. You got your metal spatula tool. And I believe, yeah, that's kind of nice. They give you an extra piece of the Capricorn Bowden tubing. So that's what comes in your little box. And now let's go ahead and put this thing together. Another point I wanted to touch on is the fact that actually the manuals that come with these printers from Creality are pretty handy and helpful. They have a lot of great diagrams and pictures. Everything's labeled and numbered, so you kind of know exactly all the pieces that you need to assemble the printer, what comes in your box basically. And then you have some pretty detailed pictures and diagrams on how to assemble the printer, connect all the cables, You got some examples for how to control the screen and the different menus and whatnot. So this is actually a pretty handy manual, considering the fact that, I mean, Creality is a Chinese company, so we all know that certain companies don't always produce the nicest quality manuals when you're trying to set something up. So props to Creality for setting up a really nice manual. Okay, so pretty standard first procedure for the CR10 family series of printers is you have to connect the gantry or Z-axis, X-axis frame to the bottom of the printer. When I say gantry, that basically means it's the part of the printer that has the Z-axis and also the X-axis that has the nozzle on it and everything like that, and your extruder and things of that sort. And then the bottom part of the printer is your Y-axis, which is basically your build plate that moves back and forth. And then you got your computer, your screen, all that stuff. So this part is a little bit tricky in that you kind of have to, if you have two people, it helps, but it's just basically you have to kind of balance the gantry on this frame while you put 4 bolts up through the bottom of the base part of the printer to secure it all as one piece. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put this thing, there goes my remote control for the TV. I'm going to put this thing partially hanging off the edge of my workbench so that I can have access to these 2 bolts. I'll secure that and then do the other side. So for this part of the step, as I said earlier, you're going to use your 4 socket cap screws with the biggest Allen wrench that comes in the kit with the printer. And you're going to place the gantry over top of the frame, just like such. And you obviously want the hot end facing towards the front of the printer. So this is the back, you want the nozzle and the hot end facing the front of the printer. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to get all 4 of them put in just a few turns, and then I'll go in and tighten them all down once they're all set in place. And before anybody says anything, it's stable, don't worry. I know it looks crooked, but I just need to do that for putting in these bolts. So when you're doing this, for those that don't understand it completely yet, so this is your gantry or Z-axis combo. So Z this way, X this way, and then the bottom piece here is Y that goes back and forth. And the important thing to note is that, I mean, they make it pretty easy. On the base plate here, there basically is a cutout for the frame rails of the gantry to slot into on the base plate, and then that gets the holes perfectly lined up for your 4 bolts. So I got the 4 bolts lightly turned in now. Now I'm going to tighten them down, obviously not too hard, but then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so we got the gantry fully secured onto the base of the printer, and that's probably one of the biggest parts. Now it's really just plugging in all your cables and doing that. So let's go ahead and continue on with those steps. Alrighty, so next step in the assembly process is you're actually going to put the spool holder on top of the printer here. So basically what you need to do that, so this is the part that actually goes inside the spool, and then it mounts to this little bracket here, and then they give you two hammer nuts and 2 bolts. So the hammer nuts basically slide into the slots on the frame of the printer, and then as you tighten them, they rotate, and then they can't pull out of the slot because it's too wide to pull out when they rotate properly. So that's basically what you're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next and move on. Okay, so I got the spool holder on, so I just wanted to give a quick tip that'll help with assembling this part. So basically what you want to do is you want to thread your bolts onto the hammer nuts when it's already through this bracket before you even put it on the frame of the printer. And then what you're going to do, you're going to align the hammer nuts so that they slide into the rail on the top of the printer here, and then you're going to start rotating at least one of them. And the tricky thing is if you tighten it down and the hammer nut still is in the same position as the rail, it won't lock into place because the hammer nut basically has to go from being like this to like this, so it can't lift out. So what'll help is if you kind of basically apply some upward force with your hand as you're tightening the bolt down, and that'll keep the hammer nut from spinning back into the parallel position with the rail and not stay secured and pull out. Okay, so this next step is actually really important because this helps make sure that your Z-axis rail is perfectly parallel and that your Z-axis screws are in sync with each other. So basically on these printers, I believe the CR10s and newer all have dual Z-axis rods here. So that means you've got two stepper motors for each side, which is great because it provides a little bit more force and strength for raising and lowering the Z height rather than just having one, pulling this Z rod up on this side and this side basically just being free floating. But the downside with having two Z stepper motors is that they can technically be out of sync, and then it causes this X-axis rail to be crooked one way or the other, and then that will basically affect your bed leveling because the nozzle will be too close on this side and be really far away on this side, or vice versa. So basically what you're going to do in this step is you're going to manually rotate the Z-axis rods with your hand, and you're going to kind of have to do it either simultaneously, doing each at the same time, or a little bit here and then a little there, so you slowly raise it up. And then you basically use this piece of plastic that they now supply, at least with this printer, and you're going to use this as a gapping tool so that you know that when the X-axis rail is perfectly on top of this piece over here, you set it on the same side over there, and you know then that this is parallel and good to go. So I'm going to do both at the same time. So as you can see, when you rotate them clockwise, if you think of looking down at the clock like this, it's actually raising the height of the Z-axis and the X-axis rail as well. So we just got to get it high enough so that, okay, so we're plenty high, so you can see that our piece now fits nice and underneath the X-axis rail. So now we're going to slowly lower it down until it perfectly rests on this, and make sure that the other side is the same as well. Because basically what can happen is if you turn this side a little bit too fast or too much rather than this side, you're going to have it be not parallel anymore, and that's going to cause all sorts of problems. Alright, so just a quick demo to show you guys so you can see now that the spacer shim tool perfectly flush with the bottom of the rail on this side. We do the same on this side over here, perfectly flush as well. So now we know that our X-axis is parallel and good to go. Okay, so next step of the assembly process is plugging in all of your connectors. So you've got your main wiring harness or cable here. So that guy's going to plug in here, and then this guy's going to plug in here to this male end here. And this basically supplies the power to the filament sensor, the extruder motor, the nozzle and the hot end, and the X-axis stepper motor as well. And then the next two plugs are your Z-axis stepper motor plugs. So you've got one on each side. On my printer they came taped down so they didn't move. So you're just going to plug each of those plugs into the back of the Z-axis stepper motor. So small correction to my previous statement. So the two plugs for the Z-axis stepper motors on either side, they actually plug in on the inside face of the stepper motor. So not the most ideal position because it's kind of hard to get in there. So what I recommend doing is slowly and carefully manually push the bed forward so that it gives you access to be able to plug these guys in on either side. Okay, so one last thing I wanted to mention about plugging in the two Z stepper motors is you want to make sure that you tuck the cable down into the slot where it comes out of the base of the printer is after you plug it into the stepper motor. You don't want any extra slack in the cable up top here because as you can see, you have your bed adjustment screws or knobs pretty close. So it's kind of hard to see a little bit, but these guys here, so these are your adjustment knobs, you do not want those to catch on those cables there. So basically if I didn't tuck those back into the underneath the base plate here, it would have catch on that and cause all sorts of problems printing. So make sure you make note of that and do that as well. Alright, so now we're going to plug in the ribbon cable, the main wiring harness here, and it does only go in one way, so make sure you got it right. There's basically a groove on the bottom of this that matches with the groove on the printer. And plug that guy in. Make sure it clicks in place with these little arms and they kind of lock in place. That's nice and secure. And then we got the one last connector here. That'll click in place as well, and boom! Done. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up the main assembly of all the major components, except there is one thing that isn't listed in the manual that you want to make sure you look out for. I don't know if it's just my printer or every printer that might come like this. Basically, my nozzle carriage is pretty loose, so there's an eccentric nut on the back side of this on one of the pulleys that you can tighten, and it basically tightens this up on the carriage rail here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So in between now and that last clip that I recorded for you guys of setting this printer up, it's actually been a few weeks, and the reason was the loose X carriage that I had just talked about in the previous clip wasn't just loose because the eccentric nut needed to be adjusted. It was loose because the lower part of this bracket here was actually bent. Now I don't know if that was due to shipping or a manufacturing thing, but I got this off of Amazon, like I said, on Prime Day from a reseller called ComGrow, and they sell a lot of 3D printers on Amazon, and it was pretty easy. I just did a exchange, and they shipped me out a new one within a few days, put this one together, and we don't seem to have that problem anymore. You can see it's nice and sturdy. So just basically did the setup and teardown of this printer. I set it up twice, so I'd like to say I know the printer a little bit more now since I've put it together 2 times, but overall this one seems to be great. So let's go ahead and fire it up for the first time. So on this guy, the power cord just goes into the back, and it's nice. There's no external power adapter. It's just a nice simple little cord, and then your power switch is right on the back right over here. So one of the main reasons why I chose to get this printer for my second printer in my arsenal here was I really like the fact that this one had a touchscreen with some really nice graphics, and you can see the touchscreen's pretty responsive to your touch, and it makes it really easy to go in and change settings and adjust different things with the printer, change filament, move the axes in different directions. So you can see just by the touch of the screen here, I can easily move the bed forward and back, up and down, you know, you name it. So it's just a really nice system and interface that I really like. Creality, how they implemented it on their V2 printers. It's the similar setup for the Ender 3 V2. I like my other printer because it has the more basic kind of Marlin based interface and firmware, so it's kind of cool to learn on that, but this one's definitely a step up. And then of course this printer also has the BL Touch auto bed leveling system, so that is a nice feature to have as well. Even though one of my gripes with many people in 3D printing is I think that auto bed leveling is way overhyped. It's really not hard to manually level your bed, but that's enough about this. So I think I'm going to leave most of that other talking points related to this printer in my future review after I have racked up some hours of printing on this guy, and that'll give me a better idea of some of the things I really like and don't like about it. So the placement of this printer here is just temporary on top of this chest. I actually have to extend the other table that I'm using for my other Creality printer. It's not long enough to have that printer with the power supply and interface box on the side, and then this printer next to it as well. So I'm going to be buying some MDF and actually kind of creating an extension shelf so I can have both of these printers side by side for my little mini print farm that I'd like to think it is. So I'll show you guys kind of the setup real quick, and then I'll wrap up the video. So you guys can see here, this is my current setup in my little office here. So I've got the printer on this nice little table, but you can clearly see with the way the old style CR10 printers are with their external box here, there's definitely not enough room to have the other printer on as well. If this box wasn't here, I could definitely do it, but I'm just going to be buying another piece of wood, screwing it down to the table here, and then we'll have a little extension. So I'll probably have this guy on this side, so the box is just sitting on the extension without all that extra weight from the actual printer frame, and then the new CR10 V2 will go over here in the corner. And the other announcement, probably within the next few weeks here, I'll be recording and posting a video on my almost 2-year review of my CR10 V2. I'd say I have probably close to 2,000 hours on this printer, and it has been awesome. I absolutely love this thing. So make sure you guys subscribe and stay tuned for that video to come. This is one of the best bang for your buck printers that you can buy, in my opinion. Oh, the other thing too, since I'm going to be making this extension, I don't know if I'll have enough room to actually still have this lamp on here. So I'm thinking of putting maybe some LED lights up on the top of this little kind of cutout here. This is technically supposed to be like the closet of this bedroom here, but I'm using it as an extension for my printing area. So if you guys have any recommendations on like LED light strips to put up in rooms and stuff for some cool ambient lighting and whatnot, and office lighting, please feel free to comment. I'd appreciate your feedback. Thank you all so much for checking out this unboxing and setup of my new Creality CR10s Pro V2 3D printer. I'm really happy that I got this printer when I did, because $200 off the normal retail price is a pretty dang good deal. So I'm pretty sure now that we're getting into the fall months here coming up, Amazon's probably gonna have another Prime Day, I think around maybe Black Friday. So hop on those 3D printing deals. I'll try and post some deals that I see come up when we get closer to another Prime Day or something on my Instagram. So make sure you guys are following me on my other social media sites such as Instagram and Facebook. I'm going to try and start posting a little more consistently on those as well. So again, thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to leave a comment or question in the section below, and I'll be happy to answer them. Make sure you guys subscribe for a lot more cool 3D printing content to come. So thanks again, guys, and other than that, I will see you in the next one.
My precious. Oh, that's still on.